So in talking about government in this class so far, I've been taking more of a top-down approach. What that means is I've been focusing heavily on the top level of government, the federal government, and I haven't given you a whole lot about the lower levels of government, the state, the cities even. And that is going to be the point of this video, is what local power do you have? And when compared to the presidency and the federal government, why should you care? Or even better yet, should you actually care more about state and local power than you should about the top levels of power, like the presidency? So as you might remember from Unit 2, federalism is the division of power between the federal and the state governments. There are powers that only the federal government has. There are powers that only the state level has. There are some powers that are shared. For example, levying taxes. Both the state and the federal governments can levy taxes. That means they can make you pay taxes that are applied towards paying for federal government services or state government services. Now, I think one of the reasons why people pay the most attention to the federal government is, one, it's something that all Americans have in common. Whatever laws and rules the president and Congress are involved with apply to all Americans, but also they deal with issues that are a little bit more entertaining. For example, immigration. That is a federal power. States can get involved, but it's not really their responsibility to manage immigration. But that is a very controversial personal issue for many Americans. War. I don't really need to explain how war affects people in the country. That is something that the federal government handles that the states don't. Printing money. We're all interested in money, right? Now, the state governments can affect the economy, they can affect jobs, but printing money, just like going to war or dealing with immigration, is something that only the federal government does. So why pay attention to the local government? Well, one big reason is that a lot of things that happen at the federal government happened at the local governments first. For example, many presidents were once governors of states first, because that's where they got their experience from. That's where they learned how to be a chief executive. They got experience leading the country and learning how to figure out what people want and how to react to it. Americans like to vote for governors for president because they have experience dealing with fundamental laws that deal with basic principles that the people find important. For example, protecting people's civil rights and liberties, making sure that everybody has safety and security. These are fundamental laws that both state constitutions, state governments, and the federal government has. However, one big difference between state constitutions and the federal constitution is that state constitutions are much easier to change, and so they often are. So that creates even more opportunities for a governor to be tested. How does he handle having power, having influence to change the laws and rules of the people that he is governing over? And it is in all those changes, all those details known as statutory laws, where governors and also mayors and council planners and even lower levels of government, that's where leaders really get tested. What kind of statutory laws are they involved with creating and passing? Because fundamental laws don't change that often, because those are laws that we all agree need to happen. It's the details where controversy starts. So what are some examples of details? Driver's license. It's a fundamental law that we should make sure that the roads are safe and well organized. But then we have statutory laws that make it very clear exactly what age, what procedure, what classes you have to take, what tests you have to pass. Even after you get your permit or get your driver's license, what are the rules about who you can drive with, when you can drive with them, all those rules. Those are statutory rules, and those are laws that are either passed or voted or so often even written by our leaders, such as governors. Another very important example of statutory laws is zoning laws, which simply put specify how land can be used, what areas are for living residential areas, what areas are for commercial areas where you can have businesses, where industrial areas where you can have factories that have a lot of pollution. You want to make sure those areas aren't too close to the residential areas where people are living. That's the main purpose of zoning laws. Now, those zoning laws can then be used to interpret things like, well, how should we set up school boundaries? How should we divide up voting districts, voting precincts? But that's not necessarily the purpose of zoning laws, even though that's how they're used. The main purpose of zoning laws is just to let the state and city know how that land can be used. What are the general things you can and cannot do with that land? But as you can imagine, if laws can be so much more easily passed or changed, that many states have reacted to that by coming up with more creative forms of leadership other than just having one leader make all the decisions. There are still cities that have that. They have a mayor who acts kind of like a president, only without Congress. He just makes all the rules. But then we also have systems like the council manager system of government, in which the mayor doesn't really have any power to do anything other than just to organize and help lead a council of leaders who do make the decision for things like repairing bridges or sewage systems or new roads, fixing old roads, everything that needs to be done in the city, paying for police officers, paying for firefighters. These are things that will be decided by a council in the council manager system, but the mayor is just the manager of those council members. And the reason why that's useful is because as you have so many different laws and so many different issues to manage, you end up specializing. That way you have one person who just gets good at one area of that city's government, and he just gets really good at that. Doesn't have to worry about the other things. Doesn't have to split his attention or her attention. But to make things even more complex, we have 50 states and 50 sets of laws. There are some laws that are similar, but most laws are not. Even laws that are similar aren't quite the same. So what happens if you have someone who owes a large amount of debt or committed a crime in one state, like say California, and then tries to escape it by running to Nevada, where the laws are different, and maybe he's not in violation of Nevada law, so he's thinking he's safe? Well, that's one reason why the writers of the Constitution included the full faith and credit clause, which says you can't do that. If you are guilty of a crime or you owe debt in one state, you can't escape it by running to another state just because that state has different laws. It also draws a line between the court system of the state and the court system of the federal government to give respect to the lower state courts. So if someone commits a crime that's only state law and the state Supreme Court says, no, you did it, you can't try to go over the heads of the state and go to the federal government and say, hey, can I get appeal? Can I get another trial? The only time that you can ever do that is if the crime committed or the conflict that the lawsuit has to do with involves the violation of a federal or constitutional law. If no federal or constitutional law has been violated, then you cannot appeal to the federal government. The federal government will just say, no, that is the state law's power, it is the state law's authority, jurisdiction, and whatever they say, we respect that, and you're going to have to deal with that. What the full faith and credit clause doesn't say is that all the states have to actually have the same laws and rules. They have to respect each other's laws and rules. So if you get married and get a marriage license in California, just because you go to Nevada doesn't mean you're not married anymore. Nevada has to respect the fact that you got married in another state, has to respect that marriage license. Same thing with driver's license. That's why every time you drive to another state, like California to Nevada, you don't have to go and do another driver's test to get a brand new license, even though Nevada and California have different ways of assigning licenses to people. They have different tests, different rules. But the full faith and credit clause says they have to respect each other. But they don't have to be the same. And they're not responsible for each other either. So if you break a law in California and run to Nevada, Nevada might help track you down and return you to California, but they're not going to put you on trial. They're not going to put you in their jails and spend their money on you. No way. They're not forced to do that. They can if they want, if California's okay with that. But Nevada's not forced to because of the full faith and credit clause. It says we're supposed to respect each other, but we don't have to do each other's jobs. I don't have to fulfill your obligations or enforce your laws, but I will respect your contracts, your rules, and your licenses for the citizens who travel into our states. Which is also why you have 50 different states and 50 different ways of voting. Some states do electronic voting. Some states do paper voting. And even then, if you have 2 states to do paper voting, the paper ballots might be completely different. Now, they all have to let you vote. That's a fundamental law. That's a fundamental right. You have to be able to vote. But the way you vote, no, each state can do its own thing. So that's all the time that we have right now for talking about state and local power. If you have any questions, please let me know in class.